It's Damon and Robert's 5 Songs, a podcast starring Damon and Robert. 10 songs enter, 10 songs leave. It's not that kind of podcast.
It was in Shadowrun. And we are live.
I feel like in Shadowrun, at least, you had that cool decking ability and you could get the guide wires and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's true. You had to carry that keyboard, that full-size keyboard around everywhere, though, and plug it into stuff.
Yes,
right.
Because they couldn't type in the air. You had to type
no, you could
physical.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is one of the fun things about being sort of a cyberpunk fan through the ages. If you get to see all the weird assumptions that they made about what would stick around.
One of the things that I think not Neil Gaiman, author of Neuromancer.
William Gibson.
William Gibson, thank you.
Yes.
Oof, terrible.
Yeah,
He did not understand that faxes would be gone so quickly because there are faxes.
Right. And there were also dot matrix printers in Neuromancer. There's streams of that printer paper floating in space. I remember in Zero
Who
G.
prints anymore?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, that was out of date by the time I read it. And that was pretty early. So yeah. Anyway, well, welcome, folks. There's our little insight into
cold intro,
cyberpunk and Shadowrun. Exactly. So, but welcome to Damon and Robert's 5 Songs. This is episode 7. 7. Yeah, that's true, Robert. We'll talk about how many songs we have today. It may be 11 or maybe 5.
Yes. Well, some of us don't count well.
But yeah, this is episode 7. We did our spooky season episode last, I think, and then we had kind of a break.
What an interesting set of days we've had.
We took a little break, and I think shortly after our spooky season episode, something happened that caused me to email Robert and say, "Why don't we make the next show about angry songs?"
I don't understand why.
Sticking it to the man, right? No, I mean, we don't have to go into why, but if you've been on the planet Earth for the last 60 to 90 days, you've probably got a pretty good reason why. I mean, you can guess, and you're probably right.
Yes. So your head too may have forehead indentations against the keyboard.
That's right, from pounding and pounding to no avail. But we're going to talk about angry songs today, which is kind of fun, right? That's different. So right, well, Robert, may I ask, what is it? What do you think broadly? What do you look for in an angry song? You looking for something to kind of fuel your, to keep you in that space, something to gradually get you out of it, or where do you land?
Generally, I think of angry songs as kind of like adding fuel to a fire. Yes, I do think that you don't go to an angry song to think, this will soothe me. It sometimes does.
Right.
But that's not the goal. That's not what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Right. You're not looking to work through it at that point. You're looking to kind of lean into it.
Work through it.
Yeah. No, I think so too.
We are men of a certain age and
it takes a really long time to work through anything now. But yeah, I think I'm in the same place. I think mostly mine are ones that put me kind of that make me settle into that anger a little better, or in my particular case, I have that affliction where I can second guess my worthiness to be angry. I'm like, wait a minute, do you deserve to be angry? And some of these songs help me know, oh yeah, 100%. You've earned this. You can settle into it and really feel it.
I don't feel like I question my anger to that degree. My anger is pretty. It's a well-worn groove.
That's good. See, I think that's healthier actually to engage with your anger as it arises. And I'm like, oh no, I'm like, oh wait, can I afford to be that angry? Am I really that angry? And I'm like, sometimes it's better to just feel it than to spend a whole lot of time analyzing it, right? Or you can put on some music and then, right? And if you don't know what music you might put on, well, we're going to have some options for you.
Some samples, if you will.
Some samples, right? No hard and fast rules here, but just some for instances. We enjoy these.
And I do think, and as we discussed preliminarily, we have very different reach outs for our anger.
We do.
Mine tend to be fast, loud, aggressive, which is a good portion of my music in general, I think qualifies in those categories.
True.
Yours, less so, but not... I think yours are more of a cutting anger, not self-cutting, but the hidden dagger, if you will.
Yes, sort of. Yes, are very. They sort of talk a lot about what they're angry about in very specific ways. And you're right. I think your choices express a lot of anger through their energy, right? Because they're high, they're loud, they're angry, they're dark, in ways.
There's no question.
And things, right. And it's not that some of mine. I think I've got at least one on there that's certainly a little heavier than maybe some of the others. But generally, I think lyrically is kind of my way into anger. And energy is sort of your tune's way. So they're two sort of different approaches, but perhaps
neither wrong.
No, of course not.
Absolutely.
Perhaps some of our listeners will gravitate toward one or the other, or perhaps there is another way that they gravitate, and they can send us email, and because the comment or email will be in the little thing down below wherever you're watching.
If we point down, it'll confuse
If you point
people.
down, right, it's probably down there. If you can see us point in the media in which you are enjoying
consuming this,
send us an email. Let's you want to do the numbers on this batch?
Sure. Hit me with the numbers, sir.
Robert's earliest tune from this batch, 1995, and Robert's latest tune, 2019. Pretty recent, so within but a pretty broad range for you, all the way back to 95 is back
almost
there.
My youth.
Almost, right? Yeah. Exactly. We were still not almost young men. Yeah. My earliest tune, 1966. Damon's latest tune, 2000. 2000 is actually pretty current for me.
I was going to say
66 maybe.
We don't always cross over. Yeah.
No. We got we got a little crossover this time. So interesting. Robert's list. Now we have 6 songs on Robert's list, which I was supposed to, I think, pick one to drop, and I never did. so those 6 songs come out to about 28 minutes, but my 5 songs come out to about 22 minutes. But if I drop like one of your songs, you're about 22 minutes too. So really, I think comparable in time run wise. In this case, it's just a little longer because we had the 6th one, and I could never decide which one to get rid of. So pretty comparable, all told. And the number of drummers injured, 0. And I think that's really important because you need drummers for angry music. I think it's a very critical role, the drummer.
True. It's true.
I think.
Although I can think of at least one drummer dead on your list.
Oh yes.
I'm not sure about the other 4.
I don't know either.
At least
but
one.
probably the most famous one, definitely dead. Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed.
Foreshadowing.
Well, that's right. Take that, folks, for what you will. So who shall begin this time? Robert, should you begin, or shall I begin?
Let's you begin, since I have 6 songs. That way I can both begin
there you go.
and end. I am Alpha and Omega.
You are the Alpha and the Omega. You are the first and last man. Okay.
That's true.
So
and I am damn tired of it.
I don't. And why not? Right? You give the man some rest. Let him be the man in the middle for a change.
The rest for the wicked.
Exactly. The first song on Robert's list this time is Self-Bias Resistor by Fear Factory from, I believe, their 1995 album, Demanufacture. So this is kind of one of the earliest thing on your list this time. And it's super heavy and fast, which surprised me a little bit, given that it was a little earlier, right? In some ways it sounds kind of more modern to me, but it's got that kind of machine gun sort of drum and a guitar sort of riff kind of trading off in the beginning, and gradually kind of builds up sort of a more complex rhythm between those two before the vocal comes in. And it's a real heavy vocal. It's not the harsh vocal, not the, but it's kind of close. It's on the darker side. And this is one that I thought had kind of a cool what do I want to say? Sort of a difference between the verse vocal and the chorus vocal. The chorus vocal sounded like it had kind of a more melodic sort of feel, a little more soaring than the verse vocal. but man, the drums keep cooking the whole time. You have like this rising, sort of soaring melodic vocal, but the drums like really hold this like steady, super fast beat. And it sets up a kind of a call and response between this heavier vocal sort of telling you all the things you need to wake up from, and this more melodic voice that kind of encourages you to, to do the thing you need to do to break free. And lyrically, it sounds like it's kind of sort of a call to action. Like this was part of the chorus I grabbed. Like all these years they've tried to break you to your knees. Anger scours right through your veins. Now it's time to put it into all the lies. Now it's time to take control of your life. So it's kind of like anthemic, like, hey, you got to act like now is the time. So there's sort of like two things happening, like the heavy vocal sort of telling you about all the bad things that are happening. But then there's this chorus one that's more melodic and kind of sort of trying to get you to your feet, I think. And I found a little mention of a review that I agreed with, so I grabbed it. This song is about people in a modern Big Brother-like society rising up and destroying the higher governmental powers that are watching their every move and subliminally enslaving their minds. The man versus machine concept is a common theme in this band's songs. And I'm like, oh, that kind of like, I feel that. So yeah, I can definitely see why this would be like a cool, angry song, because it's got like that. It's got the energy that moves you, so it's going to like feed right into what you're feeling. But it also has this kind of anthemic, like, hey, you can't stay here. Like, you just can't do that and expect anything to get better. You're going to have to like get to your feet. You're going to have to do some stuff. You're going to have to move too. And I thought that was kind of cool. Like, it's not just a song that's like, it's bad, and you should be angry. It's like, it's bad and you should be angry, and you got to stand
do
up
something.
and do something. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was fun, and I could definitely see why like this would be a song that you would put on when you're angry. And I'm like, it's going to help me. It's going to keep me there, but it's also going to help me like when I eventually have to do something it's like, I'm going to have to do something to feel better. This song sort of acknowledges that. And I thought that was a cool, a sort of a cool message for a song like this. So talk a little bit about this one, Self-Bias Resistor.
So, funny enough, this was on the original Mortal Kombat, the movie soundtrack, which is where I first heard it. It's totally randomly. The band is a kind of melange, there's a fancy word, between industrial and heavy metal. And industrial, you don't really hear so much about that anymore. But that industrial,
that's
for
true.
those who don't know, it was kind of the sound of industry, all machine created sounds.
Yeah.
And like Nine Inch Nails, early Nine Inch Nails really was a great example of industrial stuff. Ministry, Skinny Puppy, that sort of thing.
Right, you're right. That's a term I don't hear much anymore.
No,
like,
I think
hear people talk about industrial, kind of, because we sort of got subsumed by other things later.
It was so, I love the whole branching tree of musical genres and how things are, nothing is pure.
Right.
But, industrial is this branch off the electronica thing, and metal is a branch off the rock thing, and these two sort of coalesce.
Good together.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I like it a lot because I like that blend of harsh, angry vocals and the melodic stuff. I like the discord and the rhyme together. I've always been a fan of that. So this is 30 years old now, which kind of
that's amazing. Yeah,
breaks me a little bit.
It doesn't sound 30 years old for what it's worth. Like, it definitely sounds more modern, and I think maybe it's that. The industrial elements, they sort of hit different now. Like, they sound, and at the time I would have taken them as, this is like a real industrial, like a Nine Inch Nails kind of sound. But now it sounds different, because there's so many people playing like new metal and other types of metal like super fast, that when you put some of those like fast industrial sounds in there, you're like, oh, it sounds more modern. It's kind of fun.
And just on a quick tangent, who would have ever thought that new metal would come back? New metal, for those who don't know, was the mesh between metal and rap, and it was much maligned after it, it was big for a while, and then people hated it. And now here we are in 2024 going to 2025, and there is a resurgence of new metal. There is a whole new generation of new metal bands. and I honestly can't name any of them, except the ones that are still around. Like Limp Bizkit is still going,
right? Still going, still touring.
Who would guess? Yeah,
still, right. Hey, if there's a Hardee's parking lot that needs to be played,
they're there. They're available.
Sorry, hey, Limp Bizkit fans, send us an email. Tell me what an asshole I am. Okay. I think that's interesting though about like the new metal, because I kind of feel like sort of hip hop and rap in other genres sort of like got a black eye at that same time, and now it's everywhere, and it's normal, and it's accepted, and it's really dominant, and it's I think over time people have, I don't know whether we've just gotten so much better at doing it, or I think we've just gotten more used to hearing it, I think, and understanding that that's just another way, that the song's going to tell us something, but it doesn't. It no longer seems like, clutch my stars and garters, what are you doing? Like, you can't do that. Yeah, and I think at the time there was still a lot of sort of purism in music fans who were like, don't put your chocolate in my peanut butter, but now we're like, everybody loves Reese's. So.
We can
allow me to spin elaborate food-based metaphors for things.
Perhaps you should have eaten before we recorded.
We're recording this around lunchtime, and maybe I should have had
the
a sandwich. Clearly not enough. So Self-Bias Resistor by Fear Factory, from 30 years old now.
Yes, I think it's a good start. It's a fine start.
It is. It's a good start. Stay angry, my friends, with Self-Bias Resistor.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So Damon's number one, which was a surprise, which is a definite surprise for me, was Trouble Every Day from the Mothers of Invention. Now, I know this band through Frank Zappa. I mean, how do you not know Frank Zappa?
How do you not know Frank Zappa?
But this is not the Frank Zappa that I know well, because this is not that kind of weird, fringy, experimental side. I mean, this is kind of straightforward. I mean, let's say it was almost like CCR classic rock.
Yeah.
And I've listened to him like, am I on the right track? Because I've had that problem with you.
Yeah, that's true.
Steely Dan.
Right? You can mix them up, right? But no, you were on the right one.
So lyrically, even though this is your 1965 song, really not your oldest song, second oldest? Or no,
it is the oldest. Yeah, I think it's the oldest in this band.
The other one is close.
Yeah.
These lyrics are just as relevant and I would say cutting today as they were in 65. This is some killer stuff. So this is a couple lines that jumped out at me. Number one, I'm not black, but there's a whole lot of times I wish I could say I'm not white.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, like 65, right? Yeah, that's really early to express that idea.
This is true. Today, it's a lot less of a controversial statement.
Right.
It probably was like, oh my God, what is wrong with you in 65?
Right.
That there's no way to delay that trouble coming every day. So this immediately made me think about the school shootings.
Yeah.
How we forever hear people say nothing can be done here in this country, the only country where this happens.
Exactly, right. The only country this regularly happens. Can't manage to solve it.
Exactly. There's this bit by Kyle Kinane. I probably brought this up before. He asks if it's safe yet to make a joke about the last mass shooting. Not the new one. No, that'd be too soon. But the last one.
Right.
And the punchline of the joke is, this joke is never out of date.
That's right, because that's right.
We are forever in this cycle.
We can't talk about the one from today, but we can talk about yesterday's.
Yesterday is old news.
That's old, exactly. Right. What there have been, I forget the number, but I saw the other day there have been 300 and almost 400 mass shootings to date this year, so more than one a day.
And we're on the 21st, for those keeping track at home when we're recording.
That's right, not quite done yet.
So the last lyric pulling up is, ain't no fire in the heart and in the eyes of all these people. Don't you know this could start on any street in any town? And that basically is that this anger is so deeply, rooted in people's hearts and people's, repression that this could be constant. And I think that proved prophetic. I don't think that was in any way a far-fetched statement.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So this, we were not around for the Watts riots. We're old men, but we're not that old.
That's right. We're not that old.
But we've seen rioting in our time. We've seen lots of it in the last, 6 years.
Yeah.
And probably some more in the next couple.
That's right.
Anyway,
I would imagine.
Tell me about how you came across this song, what it means to you.
Yeah, so I'm a Zappa fan, but because my brother Tony was a big Zappa fan, I heard a lot of it growing up. But I mostly know him for kind of what he's known for, right? Like this weird kind of comedic sort of songs that are often political, but very funny and irreverent, and yeah. So
Avant-garde gets thrown around a lot.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this one, this album, Freak Out, it was actually the first album that Frank Zappa and the Mothers released, and apparently, MGM, it was released on MGM, and MGM signed them based solely on this song, which they
Wow.
heard, and they thought they were a white blues band. And what they got was something very different,
Yes.
because this is not representative even of the rest of the album necessarily, but it is very kind of like, to your point, like a straightforward kind of sort of like rockin' tune you might hear in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of the kind of instrumentation that you would expect on like a CCR song or something else that you would hear on the radio in the day. But yeah, he wrote it after watching the Watts riots, and it's always struck me as really prophetic. I came back to it when the LA riots after Rodney King. It made sense to me then. Like every time that there's sort of a riot and this sort of unrest, like I go back to this song, and there's so much that I find in it that just seems like prophetic and clear-eyed. It expresses frustration with like the TV news coverage in a way that's really early and really astute. It's like all that phony stuff on sports and all those unconfirmed reports. I watched that rotten box until my head began to hurt. It's like,
Yes.
but it's this idea that TV is like not your friend. It's not really there to inform you. It's there to entertain you or distract you or keep you from sort of what's going on. And to your point, like the end, that idea that this could start anywhere, that like, this country isn't above this. It
Yeah.
is like enmeshed in it. And like this could start anywhere. And we've seen it, to hit with, he's writing about it in Watts in the 60s. Look at all the places we've seen it since. So the idea, I think, at the time was probably prevalent that, well, this is just LA and it's different, and these are LA people. But I think Frank's exactly right to say, don't think this is just like an LA or like a Watts problem. Like this is a USA problem. This is an American problem.
Not
And it
isolated.
goes
Right.
deep. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah. After the anger-inducing event in question, I listened to the song a lot the next day, because it does. I think in this case, when I'm angry about these things, like it reminds me that there are other people who saw it coming. That I'm not alone in this, or like, hey, this isn't like out of left field anger. It's like, this is a guy who wrote that. Geez, what is that? 60 years ago now, and we're still, you and I are still like, man, this could have been written. It's super relevant. It could have been written a couple years ago, when we had riots with the George Floyd thing, and there were riots all over the place. Like, you could have written this about a whole bunch of them. And it's you can say a lot about Frank, and there's probably, he's sort of a complicated character, and it's difficult, I think, to sort of full-throatedly embrace everything Frank did and said. But
I don't think he even did that, though.
Yeah, I don't think he did either, and I think it changed for him over time. And but there's a real willingness here to sort of indict both sides, to indict everybody, which I really appreciate. And I think in the 60s would have been like totally out of left field for a lot of people, I think. But there is, like, I think Frank very much is saying, we can't, like, it's either side that says, well, it's those people, or they're different than me, or they're, because they're white or because they're black, we can't work this out. And he seems unwilling to accept that. And I think that's something that resonates with me, more and more the older I get, is it's like, we got to like put all the cards on the table, and everybody's got to be willing to give a little to try to get to the bottom of this. So I appreciate that too. And I think that's something that maybe, we don't always hear about even in the debate now.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, those people are just evil and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Yeah, you're right. There definitely is, he indicts the police, he indicts the rioters, he indicts the press. Everybody is at fault to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's a stirring indictment. But again, sort of like the self-biased resistor, I don't feel like it's not exactly a call to action, but I think it's a warning that that this is not going to stop, that this is going to keep happening. And I think 60 years on, we can look at it and say, yeah. Yep. He was right.
Only in this country. We can do nothing.
Keep happening. Exactly. Yeah. Frank Zappa. I didn't know that about them being signed to MGM. I found that out this morning based on this song. It was wow. Whatever MGM executive signed that deal probably got in a lot of trouble. It's like, wait a minute, did you hear the rest of this album? Because it's bonkers. They released it as a single. That was the A side, and the B side was another song off the album called "The Son of Monster Magnet." Just to give you a sense of like how it's like, okay, that's Frank Zappa. But
I've heard some of it because I had an uncle who was really into him, so I don't know song names, but he's like, check this one out, and we'd be listening to the whole album for a half hour, just going, what the hell?
What the hell's happening? Yeah, so it's like a combination of like really weird, like psychedelic weirdness. Yeah. And then Zappa also loved doo-wop music, so there's a lot of doo-wop music on there that are like real, like it really greatly rendered, but also kind of funny ones. Like "Go Cry on Somebody Else's Shoulder" is a great like a doo-wop song. So yeah, anyway, I love doo-wop music, and Frank did too. So yeah, it's weird. But let's circle to number 2 on Robert's list here. I've got "Pull Harder on the Strings of Your Martyr" by Trivium from the 2005 album Ascendancy. This is not the first Trivium song we've had in our lists, I think. And I did want to note that the album Ascendancy has a really badass cover. We should talk about album art more. It's like an angel demon thing. It looks really cool. And yeah, it just made me think, I'm like, man, I really used to like spend a lot of time looking at album art or thinking about album art.
That is kind of a lost thing
now. Yeah, right. I noticed it. Yeah, like this one was so cool, I noticed it. But a lot of the times now, I don't get drawn in by it. But Ascendancy. So this was it's super heavy and not surprisingly. It's actually not as fast as some of the other ones on this list, but it's got a really heavy beat, and it's initially like a little more open or airy, and then it kind of settles into like a chug and more kind of the machine gun stuff. So it's got some variety in it too, which I always like. And that the chorus is really differentiated from the rest too. I wrote down it's kind of an 80s chorus. I don't know what that was shorthand for at the time, but I think it may be more like an 80s metal sound, or like a little more open, a little less dense. And it's another one where the voice differs a fair amount between the verse and the chorus. And I admit that I struggle with the verse voice here because it's a little spitty and it's very harsh, and it's so harsh in a couple moments that it feels a little pushed or forced to sound darker or like slicker or so. So anyway, there's a moment where I'm like, I'm not sure I believe this guy. I'm not sure I believe that voice. But then, actually once the chorus comes, I kind of drop that because there's this nice interplay between those two voices. And one of my questions for you is that the same guy singing both those parts, or those two? Okay, wow. That's really cool.
He tore his throat up really bad doing the harsh vocals in this. This was the last album they did this degree of those vocals. He still does them, but he's done them smarter now.
Doesn't do. There's quite a variation. I was so taken by it. I'm like, man, I wonder if that's even the same guy, or that's like two different people. So that's cool to know. I guess this was like, I did a little like research on the song because I don't know much about that band. I know we talked about them once before, but I think this was like a big breakthrough tune for them on that second album, kind of one that sort of that they're known for, or that was really sort of anthemic for them. And there's even a lot of bands who kind of reference that tune as that's the one that kind of got us started. So it's really interesting to listen to it as kind of something that spawned other bands or So I'm curious if to hear you talk about that, if that's a thing that other bands talk about, or if this is kind of iconic for them. And the lyrically, it's another sort of metaphor, I think, for oppression. So I swiped this from somewhere, which may have been from somebody from the band or just for a review, but the lyrics are about a tyrannical dictator, and it can be applied to anything, the things that happen in your life or the things that you see around you in society. It can be about present times or ancient times. It's not quite first person perspective, more like a third person that has to suffer at the hands of a dictator. That could be a person, a gang, an army. It's trying to tackle what I think is the curse of modern mankind, that we allow these people to do these evil things to so many people. And so I think that's maybe the writer from the band, whoever wrote, the singer from the band who wrote that. But yeah, I just thought that was like a really well sort of put way to look at it. It's like, it's not about like an individual. It tries to sort of step back and take a broader view, but still, make it personal. That, being kind of abused by these powers again. So yeah, I thought it was a real chugger, man, moves like nobody's business, and had some kind of those 80s metal moments that I really dig and that sound more accessible for me. So yeah, tell me about your experience. It's also a really cool title, right? Pull harder on the strings of your martyr. They must have spent all day congratulating themselves when they came up with that title, because it's really good. They're like, dude, this is gonna be sick.
Yes, nice. And the lyrical content is very much like a deity over a worshiper type thing, of like, I control you, I can make you do this, I can make you do that. Again, pull the strings.
Right.
So this was, I think, probably the first song I heard by them. Their whole album is really quite solid. It's their first
that's their
major
second,
label release.
Yeah, they're big. Yeah. Okay. Ascendancy. Got a cool cover.
It does. It certainly does. I think that it was one of the kind of breakthrough new kind of extreme metal artists that had not really gotten a lot of more they were more underground,
well known.
Yeah. So it had been a while since an artist like this kind of heaviness had broken through to metal mainstream. I wouldn't say mainstream.
Right, but metal mainstream's different.
whatever that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, there's certainly, death metal has, its adherents, but it generally stays kind of in its own corner because death metal purists don't like it leaving that corner.
Exactly.
There's a lot of abuse around that sort of, you're not true cult anymore. Now you've sold out, whatever.
Right.
Whatever the fuck that means in this context, I don't
exactly
even know.
It's the same thing they said to the punk people back in the 80s, right?
Exactly.
That song's too long. What is that, man? Freebird? It's like 3 minutes long. You can't write us. Yeah, anyway.
If anyone has heard of you, you can't be good anymore. It's
That's
over.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So...
But they sort of broke through.
Yes.
Like they were sort of like in, a scene band, or they were known by people who were maybe sort of deeply into it, but then kind of broke through to more national recognition.
And have become kind of more a metal mainstay at this point.
Yeah.
They're still going 20 odd years later now.
Right.
In fact, so the singer, interestingly enough, has a... Got him blank out. Twitch channel where he does video gaming and his practice sessions. He'll just stream it. And he'll do requests and stuff. People can request him to do cover songs. And he's like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to try and make through it.
Right.
He's really, really talented. He's a very good guitarist and singer.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah.
And he clearly works his ass off on his craft. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
Well, that's really neat. Yeah. So that was 2005. So that was kind of early, probably. Like that was probably a good time for them to kind of break out,
right?
And to have a real good
the next wave of metal. Them, exactly. And I think Lamb of God was about the same time breaking out. Mastodon. So a lot of these southern metal rock bands. But I think Trivium's a little harder, probably, than the other two. Maybe not. I mean, Mastodon was very screamy when they started.
Yeah. Well,
who gets caught up in these things?
That's right. We'll compare heaviest, least heavy to most heavy in a future episode.
Who's got time for that? No,
exactly.
I don't even know how that really counts. All right.
All right.
So your number 2 song
Yes,
no,
sir.
no transition, straight in.
No, straight in.
No
Let's
chaser.
do it.
Yours is You're a Movie by Alice Cooper. This one I had a little trouble with because it's a little bit left of I don't even know what of.
That's fair.
It's an Alice song I'd never heard of. It seems to be about some pretty hard delusion and then like this Greek chorus of people who he prays on him. Not that he needs their help because he's praising himself left, right, and center.
Yes.
I can't tell if he's like mocking a general or if it's just like a more delusional person, like he's a chess champion with these crazy grandeur visions of himself.
Right.
But I can imagine, now bear with me here.
Yes.
That this is a sort of blowhard tool bag who might be applied in the modern day, even though this is from the 80s.
Right.
The sort of person who believes they're an instant genius and gifted in the arts of everything with not a modicum of modesty or honesty or, that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
So what's up with this song? Explain.
So You're a Movie so this is off of Alice's Special Forces album. I've been taking you through the Alice Cooper discography.
You certainly have.
So this is like 81, and this is actually the first of the albums that he doesn't remember making. So like this one and the next two he refers to as the Blackout albums, where his cocaine addiction had gotten and it's a very it's an odd record for lots of reasons, but it's an oddly like militaristic album. Like it's called Special Forces, and there was he had he wore a uniform for the tour, dressed the band like soldiers, and so there's like a whole vibe that this particular song kind of vamps on. But it's a first person kind of point of view of just who I think is just like an extreme narcissist, and a really early example that I would have heard of somebody like this. To your point, I think it's like a general or maybe a metaphor for someone in that position, but very, very clearly someone with power who seems to think that they deserve everything they have and are kind of above reproach and very willing to send their troops to the front. What is it? Send me to the line, and the troops are all like really gung ho to go too. It's kind of an absurdist sort of performance of this, of a buffoonish narcissist. One of my first experiences of hearing a real, narcissist be portrayed here. Not that you can turn on the news these days and hear
can't
a
find
particular narcissist bantering on about how great they are and how much smarter they are than everybody else. Anyway, it was just when I hear it now, I go straight to the modern day and think, this is another guy we should be done with, right? Shouldn't we have been done with this guy? Like if Alice Cooper was making fun of this guy in 1981 when he was whacked out of his mind on drugs, why has it taken the rest of us
so long?
Exactly. Why are we still we're still propping this guy up? So in that sense, it's maybe a little more specific to our current situation than the other ones on the list. But
I kind of had this image of some of the old, maybe not black and whites, but movies of the 50s were like the really dapper gentleman whose nose is like halfway up his ass.
Exactly.
Who has like the Greek chorus of people who are kind of like, well, aren't you fancy? Aren't you amazing?
Right.
He's like, I am in fact.
All those. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a
Gaston.
Right.
I went for the Disney reference. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. But kind of like, the sort of military figure that I think at the time and in the past I would have associated with like a Banana Republic or something,
right.
Like a tropical
everywhere
situation. Right. Exactly. And now, unfortunately, it's not relegated.
If he could only pin medals on himself, he probably would, but his hands are too small.
Absolutely, too tiny. Too tiny. It's not the last portrayal of war on my list, but a very gung ho one from the general perspective.
Yes,
it would seem, right.
Good
times. Well, let's see here. I got number 3 on Robert's list is Cross to Bear by Demon Hunter. I think it's singular.
That's
Is it
right.
singular? Demon Hunter.
Yes, just one.
From the 23. I was going to
One
say,
demon,
I
one
wrote
hunter.
Hunters, but I'm like, I don't think that's right. Cross to Bear by Demon Hunter from the 2015 album Extremist. So within the last decade, look at you. It's heavy. I'm just gonna say that about everything. Now they're like really heavy.
It's a
But
theme.
I love this guy's voice. He's got like a heavy, and it sounds like kind of an evil voice, which I love in metal music. Like if your voice is on the evil scale, I like it. But it's clearer to me, like his tone or something about the way he sings, like his elocution, perhaps, which just seems a weird word to use. But yeah, like, he just says some of them. I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta go look at the lyrics to see what that guy's saying. And mostly this guy I can understand as he sings. Like
Enunciates.
It's more, so he enunciates and it's more melodic. And it also just sounds like I never have I never feel like he's putting me on or like he's doing a voice at any point in time. Like I feel like it's all kind of coming out of him. That said, it's super relentless. Like it's one of the more like relentless ones. It's got a guitar break, but it's really kind of deep in. It's like a halfway point of the tune, and that's kind of the first time it breaks. So it's a real
take a breath.
It's a real energetic chug. I mean, if you were at that show, by the time they hit the guitar break, you probably like need to sit down for a second, take a breath. And it's lyrically, this one kind of drew me in lyrically. Because I just really love the idea that cross to bear as like an image or a reference, and the repeating line that the song uses is not one of you bastards has a cross to bear, which I think, it's this, the song for me seems to like get at this kind of like people who are like really angry or feel like they've been shortchanged when in fact they have no empathy for anyone else who really has a cross to bear, who really has. So there's this kind of, chip on your shoulder, anger about, people are trying to take things from me or make me feel bad or hurt me. And I'm like, no, dude, nobody's oppressing you. You're just an asshole. That's kind of what this song is. Not one of you bastards has a cross to bear. And, I found out, again, I looked up some reviews to kind of see what other people thought about it. And they're like, Cross to Bear by Demon Hunter explores the idea of personal suffering and the challenges that individuals face in their life. The song conveys a sense of frustration towards those who claim to carry burdens and sufferings, but ultimately lack true understanding or empathy for the pain of others. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's like, that makes me mad too. And so, yeah, lyrically, like this one just really drew me in, and I'm like, yeah, I could see, that's there is something quite powerful about singing along with that sort of chorus when it's really chugging. So, in terms of like acting as a vehicle to like channel your anger, I'm like, oh yeah, man, I really feel it on this one. When you get one that like speaks to you, I'm like, yeah, not one of you bastards. You're shouting. Yeah, so I really liked it and kind of got drew into it.
It's like, what is he yelling about?
Exactly. Yeah. But so a lot of them, I've been trying to think more of them as kind of musically, because sometimes that's easier as a way for me into them. But this one kind of lyrically was in my face, and I'm like, oh, I want to go back and read the words. So, but you can kind of like follow along too. Like I think his vocal really drew me in and was kind of easy for me to follow. So yeah, I really like this one, and by the end, I was mad too. I mean, I started bad, but I was a little more mad in the way that they wanted me to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think mission accomplished. So tell me about Cross to Bear. I feel like we've talked about Demon Hunter before. Have we had Demon Hunter on a list in the past, perhaps?
We may have. I'll have to look. It's funny. They are a Christian metal band, which is not my preferred genre.
Sure.
Because I am not a
right. You're not a striper guy back in the day, right?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, they could rock. Let's give them.
They could rock. Let's not. Right.
Rock.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Demon Hunter, I really like. They are pretty. I wouldn't call them extreme metal, which is kind of what the name for not death metal, but like this heavy, fast, aggressive stuff. But they're certainly on the borderline of it. But they don't curse. They don't. Their lyrical content tends to be of a more. I don't feel that they're ever preachy, but they definitely are of a biblical, allegorical nature. But
it's got the word cross right in the title.
Exactly. This one, I mean, yes, it's the both literal interpretation of, you're measuring yourself against somebody you have no business measuring yourself, but also the ideals. You are claiming these ideals, you are claiming these burdens of abuse and grievance and whatever else. You have no right to. You have you are full of shit, is basically
that's right. You're fine.
One of the takeaways.
Yes, that's right. That's right. You're not the downtrodden masses the Bible's talking about.
Yes,
you are not the meek
just
that
a
shall
lying
inherit.
Piece of crap. Right.
Exactly.
I may be a little too far, but
maybe you might. Right. It's an interpretation of the artist's vision. I think it's fine.
It's interesting. It's a great song on its own, and I think the lyrical content is super amazing and strong. So it had to go on here. And you can feel, you're like you said, it will bring your anger up. It'll just
there's a righteous anger to it that feels right to me, and that makes sense to me. That I didn't feel it. It wouldn't have. It certainly wasn't an impediment to me enjoying it. But I'm like, oh, it's a Christian band. That makes a kind of sense, right? Like they know, Christians who actually like that Jesus guy and think you should kind of be more like him rather than just doing whatever the hell you want.
Right.
Exactly. Right.
All right. Your number 3, the most numbers of any line here we have.
That's right.
1916 by Motorhead.
Yes.
So 1916, good year? Not so much.
Not so much. It depends on who you were, I guess.
Yeah.
Most years, but
Right.
Right.
So these are my notes. What the hell? A slow organ-driven Motorhead song.
Right.
What the hell? Number 2.
Right.
This is, I think. I mean, Angry tends to be dark, and this is probably the darkest song I think you have on your list. This is about the Battle of the Somme in World War I. This was a meat grinder on insane levels. Like I know meat grinders like the Battle of Antietam and Gettysburg or whatever else, but this one, in the song, he even references 10,000 slain before noon.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of the day, it was 20,000. I think that they killed 20,000 people.
That's amazing.
Just with this crazy machine gun meat grinder. Even though, Lemmy tries to give it recognition, this is just an unbelievably, unimaginably bad time, which really, really happened. I mean, it's not like, Lord of the Rings, we can say, wow, all these orcs were killed, but this is real.
Exactly. No, these are real people with parents.
Yeah. And I think that this is probably the song he sings the most on any Motorhead album I've ever heard.
Yeah.
He's really trying and not just sort of his kind of alcoholic croaking.
Exactly. His croak. Yeah.
So, this is about a song of the young British people that signed up and thought, we're going to give those Germans hell. We're going to take it to the Krauts. And, but they all got hell. They all, this was war. I think I heard this when I was in school, in high school back in whenever that was, the early 90s. Yeah. Late 80s, early 90s. Is war was always seen as glorious, and it was an honor to go fight for war, and the Germans had a whole thing about the dueling scars. You weren't really a man until you had dueling scars, even if you had to self-inflict them. And then World War I came along, and everybody went, you know what? There's no glory in this.
That's right.
This is no longer war a good thing. No longer does it turn boys into men. It turns people into mud.
Right.
And I think this song really does a good job illustrating that while being so different from their category, so strange for them. Right. So did you find this before you were a Motorhead fan, or was this after you had already dug in?
This was after I had dug in. So this was maybe, I think maybe the last Motorhead album that I was super into. It was 91, I think. So I just started college, and I really loved rock and roll, which came out in the late 80s, was a Motorhead album that kind of got me hooked. And then I went back and, gobbled up some of their earlier stuff, which was all very fast, very Motorhead, right? A lot of Lemmy shouting. Exactly, right? If you've heard one Motorhead song and you liked it, you probably would have liked a bunch of other ones because they were all real similar. But 1916 comes out, and it's totally different, right? Like a hard left turn. So if you have that friend who's like, I don't like Motorhead, I'm like, well, you probably like this one because it doesn't sound like a Motorhead song. And yeah, it's a World War One anthem, and Lemmy was kind of a history buff, which, you got to take the good with the bad. He had, because of that, there were some questionable things like his collection of Nazi memorabilia, which was sketchy. But he loved World War One too, and knew a lot about it, and studied, and he read a lot. And I think it's an interesting tune in that it's really sort of told from a first person perspective of like you said, the kid who lies about his age, even so he can get in and join, the glorious fight against the Germans, and quickly realizes that, this is not that kind of war. No. Like if there was ever a time that war was about glory or to be celebrated, like this is not it. This idealized vision gives way. I think one of my favorite lines is like, a thirst for the Hun, we were food for the gun, and that's what you are when you're soldiers. Like this idea that you were just like chewed up by these guns, 10,000 slain, like you said, before even noon the first day. So he dies like next to his buddy, calling out for his mother who never arrives. Like it's a really grim bleak death. Yes. Very bleak, right? There's no achievement in it, like, I killed a bunch of people, or I did this thing. It's just like, no, it's like my buddy falls and I get shot next to him and we fall together, and like as he's laying there dying, sort of feeling his buddy's body grow cold. Like it's a terrible, like you think of just like a terrible way to die. So it's super bleak, and I think it does what so many great war stories do, which is show that, there's nothing here to be celebrated or honored. There's nothing, there's no achievement to be had here. So compared to, our Alice Cooper general who wants to send everybody to the line, this is the kid who has to live it, right? Who realizes too late, in this case, that, it wasn't, maybe lying about your age to get into the army when you're 16 wasn't the best idea. Not that he would have done any better if he was 18, but
Total tangent, and this is a very personal tangent.
Yes.
Do you remember when we were at, I think it was Gen Con, and we met some guys from Rapham? Damon and I used to work for a company called Reaper Miniatures.
Yeah,
still around.
Many moons ago, but yes.
One of the guys from Rapham, I don't remember his name, but I think it was Colin or Colum. He was Canadian, but he came down and joined the U.S. Marines, lied about his age, and I don't think they cared that he was Canadian. Wow. They were just like, you go to Vietnam? You signing up to go to Vietnam? And he did.
We say, wow.
Right. He was a nice guy. He was very funny.
Yeah.
At the same time, I felt like he was a little bit unhinged, and I think that may have been.
Yeah. No, I don't remember that. Yeah, that's. I don't remember that specifically, but I also don't find it terribly hard to believe.
No.
Either that. Yeah. That the guy who did that might be a little. You're like, I don't know. That guy could kill me with that spoon.
He could.
Right?
He was super nice. He was super friendly, and I was glad to be on that side of it. Yeah.
That's right. We're like, hey, that's right. Very nice to meet you, sir, and a good day to you, sir.
And I feel like the reason I remember his name oddly is because it sounded like one thing, but he would kindly correct you that it was the other thing. It was Colum, not Colin. Or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Something like that. It's interesting. Robert,
a long time ago,
have been involved in gaming and role-playing games, war games and things like that. And it's thinking about many of the people that I've met who've served time in the military has largely been through gaming. Like I've met a lot of people there, and they've for the most part, been very lovely people. Bobby Jackson, I think, was an Army Ranger, was a sculptor for one of the nicest people you will ever meet. If you get a chance to meet Bobby Jackson at a show, say hi. He's a lovely man,
really
a veteran and an amazing sculptor, and just a real cool guy. So
good sense of humor too.
Great sense of humor, like really easygoing. So, I think even as a kid, I might have been kind of suspicious of folks with that background just because I didn't really know any, right? And mostly through media, So anyway, just as an aside here, it's interesting to think that I met a lot of people with military experience, largely through gaming, and glad to know them because I don't know that I would have known those folks another way. So.
Even the scary ones.
Well, there are scary people, in and out of the military.
Right.
Unfortunately, so we get
true.
both kinds. But let's see. The next one on my list for Robert is "Face Down" by Killer Be Killed from the 2014 album of the same name, Killer Be Killed. And this one struck me kind of different. It sounds it has kind of I actually referenced California Uber Alles, and there's like something about the way it starts, like it's got sort of a beginning that put me more in mind of like punk music maybe than like some of the other stuff on the list. And it's got a real melodic riff that immediately comes in and like hooks me, and I'm like, okay, like whoever's writing this has got Damon's number. And I like the vocal style. The rhyme scheme is really tight and does like a lot of internal rhymes in lines that keep things moving. And I love this guy's voice. It feels more like older, like hardcore and punk stuff that I dig and I dug earlier as a kid. So that's when I'm like, wait a minute, is this the one from the 90s? And I'm like, no, it's not. It was like a decade ago, but it's pretty current. And this was another one where I'm like, are there two vocalists here? Because there's another call and response, three vocalists that get into. So I'm like, they sound like there were different voices here to me. So I was curious about this. In terms of the subject matter, I just wrote, I stole this quote, that nobody ever wrote a song called "Fuck the Fire Department." Is that right? I mean, that's basically, it's basically about, it's about like many of them about oppression, but it specifically seems to be about police, overstepping, and and it just, and I'm like, I feel this. So I think this was actually maybe my favorite of all of them, where I'm like, I'm just going to put this on my list, like, because there's something about it that sucked me in, and I really like the sound. So I'm curious to know more about this one, because it feels a little bit like an outlier on the list to me.
This so Killer Be Killed is kind of a super group. It's
okay.
It was a guitar player and singer from the band. Oh hell, they broke up, so I'm gonna blank on their name. I'll come back to them. It's a bass player from Mastodon.
Enough. Okay.
It's a guitar player and singer from originally Sepultura, and then he went his own way with Soulfly.
Okay.
Max Cavaleros, I think his name is.
Okay.
I don't remember who the drummer is from. I know he's from a band, but I don't remember the name of the band. God dang it, I can't think of the...
But they were all guys from other sort of bands who came together to do this.
Yes. And the whole album is fantastic. This song is kind of very hardcore-esque. Why am I blanking on his name? It's funny. He replaced the original singer in the band. The band is very weird, experimental math metal stuff.
Yeah.
Calculating Infinity is their album, but I can't think of the name of the band. Anyway, he's kind of weird and controversial, the singer who's in question, because he looks like he's a bodybuilder. He's very, very muscular, whatever else. And he came into this band that's kind of this weird, sort of like acid jazz kids gone wrong thing.
Right, gone metal.
People were like, what the hell is he going to bring to this? And he brings to this masculine monster energy. And at the same time, he actually is in another band that's like 80s electronica called Black Queen, which you wouldn't know didn't come out of the 80s pop scene.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's really
very different. So pretty eclectic.
He has different personas, I think he brings to music. He's really good singer. Cool. Anyway. So yes, this is very much a F the Police sound. I don't know why I edited myself, but here we are. There's no question. There's no subtlety to this. It is down your throat,
straight forward.
Pull your lungs out, punch them back in. But it's fantastic. It is tour de force. And actually, I think my favorite singer of the three of them, Sepultura singer is good, but he's very kind of one note harsh vocals. The guy from Mastodon, he has that kind of soaring. He must use a vocoder because he's got some kind of metallic-y sound to it. Okay. But he's so good. He really can bring any song up with his voice. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. I can usually tell that was one I could write very little about.
Yeah.
Because, there's just, I'm like, I just want to listen to it again. Like, I'll just hear it again. Yeah. So I kind of know when some sort of breeze through me and I don't, I'm not actively looking for things to say about it. I'm like, man, that one just really grabbed me and kind of pulled me along.
And it speaks for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's really, really well done and moves. Yeah. Good one.
All right. This is your weirdest one on the list. This was fair. I'm not sure what Damon is doing here, and this is probably your newest song, right? Death Trip by Bad Livers?
I think so, yes.
I feel like this was the 2010, something like that.
I do think that's the most recent, yes.
So this song has weird dichotomy to it. It's got what, like, I think of, it's country style guitar and banjo, but that drum beat and a lot of the bass is almost disco and hip hop. I mean, it really it's discordant. And then the banjo solo at the end almost sounds kind of like record scratching. Like he does it in such a way, I guess, there's like some lift offs or whatever else that sounds like it's being. It's like strange.
Affected. Yeah.
Lyrically, it's kind of the stereotypical old country song of, lost my woman, lost my dog, lost my truck, missed the dog. It's not quite that bad, but it definitely
close.
is.
It follows the form, right?
Yes, the form is respected. It's got the world gone to shit downward spiral of, things are going bad. Like even the pastor sells him out. The pastor tells the cops he's a drug dealer.
Right. So,
his dad throws him out. There is the partial redemption of a good woman at the end.
That's right. Things get a little better.
But a little bit, not a lot, just a tiny bit.
It's a little.
He does not get his dog back, although there's no dog.
No, I mean, you never get the dog back.
It is catchy as hell. I mean, this song, of all of them, I found myself kind of singing, "I'm on a death trip, baby." And I'm like, aren't we all kind of on a death trip?
Exactly. Yeah. Right? On a long enough timeline, Robert, aren't we all on a death trip?
Excuse me. Yes. Bad Livers. I assume that's a drinking reference.
I think so. I assume so, too, that it is a drinking reference. So the Bad Livers are a band. It's really just sort of the brainchild of Danny Barnes. That's the guy who plays the banjo and sings, and he sort of writes everything. But he was a very good banjo player, like a very sort of like bluegrass skilled banjo player, but was really interested in punk music and like lots of different kinds of music, and formed a band called the Bad Livers with a bass player and a fiddle player who were also very skilled bluegrass musicians, but were interested in lots of other kinds of music.
That's a crossover you don't see.
Yeah, particularly like punk music in the 70s and 80s they were really into. So it's a weird, but I always feel that more, like I feel it more in kind of their sensibility, like the way they write songs. But this one musically, like really, to your point, goes bonkers. And I just think that Danny Barnes was probably in a studio and had some time and some money and just did, like, there's even some funny part at the beginning where he like mouths the word special effects into a microphone with like a big, you can tell him like, dude, you're just having fun now. But there is like a very hip hop kind of beat to it, and I just thought it was a fun juxtaposition of that kind of very sort of straightforward country song laid over this really not sort of bluegrass or country beat, with his banjo style, which alternates between these little licks that sound like they'd be fine in bluegrass and other stuff. You're like, well, that seems kind of scratchy or weird, or kind of playing off the overall sound. So sonically, I think it's a lot of fun, and music, like lyrically, there's some great moments in there. When he talks to the cops pull him over, the deacon sells him out, right? Well, he said the lawyer and the deacon said, I sold it by the pound. So like someone gets pulled over because they think he's a drug dealer, but yeah, it just sort of kind of leans into that persecution that you feel when you're angry, or when things is like, when one bad thing happens, they all kind of
domino,
domino on. His lady leaves him, he gets, the people in his life don't trust him, or they don't really believe in him, and ultimately kind of turns it around just with another woman, right? I just find another woman who's kind of nice to me. So, but yeah, the refrain and I'm on a death trip, baby, is really catchy. So yeah, I think this is probably in the grand scheme of things, this is probably on my anger recovery list. Like if I'm still angry, but I'm getting ready to come out, I'm like, okay, I've been angry long enough. Maybe we'll start to put on the death trip where I'm like, okay, well, he knows that not everybody's on his side and the world isn't necessarily nice to him, but there's still like maybe a little light at the end of the tunnel, and on a long enough timeline, we're all on a death trip anyway. So yeah. It's definitely an odd choice for the list, but
yeah, you have to have a little bit of variety. It can't be all variety,
right?
Death and destruction.
Can't be all death and destruction. But that's a segue into your next tune, which is Bridge Burner by Mutoid Man.
Yes.
From the 2015 album Bleeder. This one's kind of, I use the word sludgy, which I don't know if that's a word, but it's kind of dense, and it struck me as sort of different from the get-go. And there's almost this kind of, it's almost a string-like sound that they get using the synth and guitar that kind of builds on each other at the beginning. And when it kicks in, it's like a real toe tapper. Like it's some of these are, they're so fast sometimes that I have kind of a hard time, tapping my foot to them. But this one, like I really like locked in on it right away. The riff is really melodic and catchy, and generally I just thought the sound was like a little less dense than elsewhere, and that always makes it a little easier for me to kind of zone in on what's going on. The chorus was a little I use the word carnival-y, which is probably an overstatement, but it was very different. I think it's like definitely almost maybe a little too melodic for me. Like it really goes, kind of turns it up to 11, but the verse is like sharp as hell. And lyrically it's got, it's pretty tight. Like I think it just has like 2 verses. It just repeats and that's the whole thing. But, let's see, what are they? They're we're past friends forever. Someday I'll learn, aka never. Yeah. Time to wash our hands of you. Time for naivety is through. Time to wash your hands of us. Bring on the fuss. So it's a kind of bridge burner with the title. This is one I like too, because like they don't say it, I don't think, anywhere in the song, but the title is clearly like,
the first line is bridges will burn.
That's right. That's right. Bridges will burn. Right. Yeah, exactly. They say it, but yeah. Like clearly cutting somebody loose who you no longer need,
you screwed me over,
sort of exactly betrayed you or something, and we're done. Which I think is just like a great anthemic, like angry song topic, right? It's like there's nothing that feels like more of a betrayal than somebody that you kind of let in, who then like cuts you off or does something where you're like, I gotta turn my back on you now. So yeah, I really like this one, and I hadn't heard. I don't know this band, Mutoid Man, but I'm like, yeah, it's another one like the previous one that kind of struck me as a little different sonically than some of the others on the list. But I quite enjoyed it and thought, even though lyrically it's pretty short, but. Yeah, it worked for me. It is, yeah. I'm like, you don't need a lot of words. No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So tell me about Bridge Burner and Mutoid Man.
So this band is kind of a side project of 3 guys from the bands Converge and Cave In, which I think are all out of Massachusetts, and they're kind of early 2000s metal stalwarts or whatever. Mm-hmm. But Mutoid Man, funny enough, is the house band for the fake late night metal variety show called 2 Minutes to Midnight.
Okay.
Which is headed by Guarcinio Hall, who is a host with death metal corpse paint. Nice. And they have various guests on there and show. It's like a late night talk show with a little bit of skit, because like they had a whole thing where they were they sent a guy in corpse paint to go outside of Glenn Danzig's house, wherever the hell he is in California,
right?
Like looking for a sighting, no sighting.
No sighting. Right. See if we can see Glenn carrying some cat litter into his car.
But yeah, so they were the house band on 2 Minutes to Midnight, and they participated. They would just like have banter back and forth with Guarcinio Hall, And it was just a lot of fun. And so I'm like, well, let's just hear what this band sounds like, and they sound fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
They're not. So Converge is very much a screaming band.
Okay.
Cave-In they're a little bit more well-rounded, I think, as a metal band. And then this one is pretty, I would say, slower and a little bit, I wouldn't say upbeat, but kind of more a little pop inflected, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's fair given what I heard on that one.
Yeah. So I think they've only done 2 albums so far, but they're both worth checking out. They're both entertaining. So
yeah, 2015 when that Mutoid Man.
Yeah.
The album Bleeder. Nice.
And let's just say one more time, Guarcinio Hall is a fantastic name for a fake metal talk show host.
Hands down.
Hands down. Yeah.
Guarcinio Hall. It's perfect.
It's all on YouTube if you want to check that out. 2 Minutes to Midnight.
There you go. Yeah. 2 Minutes to Midnight. Is that an Iron Maiden reference?
It is. It is, in fact.
Yeah. Look at me.
Or maybe it's 2 minutes to late night. Maybe that's
2 minutes to late night. Okay. There you go.
That would make more sense.
That's either way. It's okay.
All right. Your fifth and final.
Fifth.
Yes. I can't count. So
that's all right. I got one more. I got one, but
the whole song's concept is lost on me because
it's fine. We don't have rules.
No, we only have rules to laugh at them and ignore them.
Exactly.
Can't count. Anyway, Had Enough by The Who, which is good for a last song on the list.
Right? Had Enough.
This is a great song about being fed up with the bullshit. Although I have to say the chorus kind of feels like a letdown. Roger Daltrey is reading us the riot act about he's had enough, and then it turns all kind of choral and sing-songy, and it's not the best Who. But I don't know this song. I knew it was late era Who because it has that kind of late 70s rock bloats, like a lot of synths and strings. Not the raucous Who of before where, every guitar and amplifier must die. I feel like Pete Townsend was going, those Queen people are onto something, and then he overdid it. But the lyrics are on point. I mean, there's hell. It's like, so one of them is, I've had enough of being trodden on. My passive days are going to be long gone. If you slap one cheek, well, I ain't going to turn the other.
Yeah.
There's no doubt what he's going for there.
Exactly. It's pretty on point.
Yeah. I'm getting sick of this universe. Isn't going to get better. It's going to get worse. The world's going to sink with the weight of the human race. Okay, you want to talk about prophecy?
Right, exactly.
You can feel this anger, and then I think your anger kind of grows when you get let down a bit by the chorus of this song. But I mean, Roger Daltrey had a pair of pipes on him that was amazing.
Yeah,
and sometimes I do think that they got kind of muddied by this operatic wishes that Townsend had, because I don't think Daltrey was into that, but Roger Daltrey? I don't know.
Roger Daltrey, that's right. Yeah, Pete Townsend and Roger, they clashed a fair amount.
A little bit. As many good bands did.
It's true.
Yeah, you can't all be the star. But anyway. Right. But it's still a good song. It's not a bad song, but it definitely there are parts that are a little overblown because that was the 70s, the era of arena rock, and they decided to go all out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
big. Had Enough by The Who.
Have you had enough?
This is the one, like, if I want to settle into a good mad, this is the one. This is the one I'll put on. Like, if I'm beginning to feel it.
It's a long song. Yeah.
And I don't want to lean out of it, but I want to lean into it. This is the one I will put on. Huh? My wife's like, oh, he's listening to Have Had Enough. I'll leave him alone. I'll give him a half hour. So this was written by John Entwistle, the bass player of The Who, one of a handful of tunes that, worth talking about.
I'm aligning the wrong man.
Entwistle. Well, not really, because, I mean, to your point, Roger Daltrey was very unhappy with the production of this song. He didn't want the strings, which he thought took away from. Daltrey was very prickly about production and bashed heads. Apparently, he got into a physical altercation with the producer over this.
Wow.
Yeah, which was not uncommon either. Right. Being kind of they were kind of slappy. But anyway, it's so I think that's all probably spot on. And this was off Who Are You? The last Keith Moon record.
Right.
So our drumming reference from earlier, the great Keith Moon drums here and passes away before It's Hard, I think, which is the next album. But yeah, it's very much kind of this like it's an era of the Who that not everybody digs. to many of the things that you pointed out, the kind of big orchestration, the big production, really gets pushed on this album, and you can hear it here. And to me, as a Who fan since I was 16, it just sort of washes over me. But yeah, but if you're more familiar with like the Who hits, this is going to sound pretty different because they were really hitting like a really late 70s overproduced vibe here, I think. But yeah, I just love lyrically, I love it. I think it's just had enough of being nice. I've had enough of right and wrong. I've had enough of trying to love my brother. This idea that the narrator is like, it's like, man, I've been trying to be a good person. I'm putting it out there. I'm doing the stuff I should. It's
We're
like,
done now.
I love the world and the world doesn't love me back. And it's kind of that like settling into that kind of bitterness of it. Yeah. And I just, for whatever reason, it just hits the right note for me when I want to be mad at the world, or when I want to feel better about being mad at the world, I put on Had Enough, and it reminds me why all the reasons I should be mad.
All the justification you can come up with.
Exactly. And I really do. I've always loved Roger Daltrey's voice, and I think he's got kind of I often hear the word swagger, and I'm like, that's a really good word. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but there's something like kind of a strut or a swagger in his voice. And when he sings, and he's quite good also at delivering these things where clearly the narrator is hurt also, like angry but hurt, right? Like it comes from another place. And I just always feel he's really good at delivering that. And like, even if he didn't write it, if Entwistle wrote it, or Pete Townsend wrote a lot of them, like I think he's the best at delivering that sentiment that the Who can grab sometimes. And
he had a wide range between love and anger and sadness and whatever else. Definitely.
Yeah. I think if I don't know if it's like a guy who's like just all of his feelings are like just right there under the surface, and that's why they come up. But yeah, whatever it is, it really works for me. When he does a number like this, and you can kind of feel like you can hear it, and you can hear the anger in Daltrey's voice and the kind of the disappointment. And I just really love it. But it does, to your point, like it's got a lot of things that may trigger you on the production from that era, like because there's a lot like the heavy synth stuff, and Townsend was really into it too, like doing a lot of the looping things and doing a lot of synth stuff at that time. So it definitely doesn't sound like it's not Substitute or some other like Who tune, or My Generation. It's not like another one that would have been earlier and like a little tighter and rockier. But
that era has hallmarks, and I think that overproduction and bombasticness really are kind of one of the reasons why punk rose, because rock became this bloated thing and worthy of some ridicule, and punk was that ridicule, was that
exactly, sort of embodied that. And I mean, it's interesting because for me, like so much of that overproduction stuff I'm just really fond of now. In hindsight, it's like I love the punk music that kind of grew out as a reaction to it, but I still really like, I find so many things to kind of admire in those overblown productions too. So it's just interesting to see how I didn't but I wasn't actively listening to it in '78 when it was happening, so it strikes a little differently now in hindsight. But it's definitely that kind of late '70s, early '80s where there was a lot of string production, a lot of like TV and movie music was real big and soaring, and I think that all kind of is felt here too.
I agree.
Well, we have one more, Robert. I have one
encore,
more on your list, the encore edition of Damon and Robert's 5 songs plus one more from Robert is Blood Eagle by Periphery from their 2019 album Periphery 4, Hail Stan. which is an amazing album title. And I think we talked about the first song, Reptiles, on this album that we talked about before. Is like a 16-minute number, the longest song we've talked about so far. Yeah. So this one, super heavy, fast drums. There's a riff here at the beginning that's interesting because I think it hits like a weird discordant note that, would in a less fast and heavy thing would stand out a lot. But here it's just like,
it's only there for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. It goes by so fast. I'm like, wait a minute. That wasn't, yeah. So that's kind of neat. And this is another guy who is it just one guy doing all the singing?
Just one guy.
Man, he does so much stuff.
3 guitar players, one
right?
singer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you need at least 3 guitar players. But and he does so many things with his voice. I mean, some of them I like a little better than others. There's this kind of talky, reedy thing that he does that sounds a little bit like Gollum sometimes. I'm like, ooh, I really like that. But it stands out in contrast to the rest. So it's impressive to see like all the things he can do with his voice. Here it goes from like kind of the gravelly staccato shouting to these more sort of sibilant sounds. And
look at you with the big words.
Look at that, sibilant. Look at that.
Yeah.
There's there's a break about 1 or 2 minutes in, which is pretty common in these songs, right? We get like they're sort of chug along and you have kind of a break. And I started to like dig in. I'm like, Blood Eagle, I know the title reference is a Viking sort of execution torture, right? So there are references to Odin and Valhalla. So I'm like, okay, we're definitely like in some Viking vibe here. So I wanted to learn a little more. And you know what I found out? I went to Kerrang.com. Did you even know that Kerrang still existed? You remember Kerrang magazine?
I don't go there, but I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, obviously it's online now, but hey, there's still a Kerrang. So yeah, but I went out and I found an interview with one of the guys from the band who talked a little bit about it. And talked about like sort of like it's very clearly a Viking reference, right? That's a like the interviewer asked, so were you taking a more ironic approach when writing the track Blood Eagle? That's a super Viking metal topic for you guys. And he's like, I think the songs individually could be very serious. I mean, there's nothing good about Vikings slaughtering people, and I think the historical significance of that subject matter is what makes it interesting to write about. So while there are some humorous elements to the aesthetics of the album, like the title, for instance, Blood Eagle's a very serious song. It's a musical representation of that act in our mind. I mean, honestly, it should be a much uglier song, but we still need to make it sound like us, sound like them. So that's really interesting, this idea that, there's something we're trying to capture some essence of this kind of a terrible act, right? It was a terrible, I forget, like when you like pull their ribs out of their back or something so they have wings. It was a horrific sort of way to die, too. Right? Yeah, the lungs would. Yeah, it was a bad scene.
And it was reserved for people who were like betrayers. It wasn't like
traitors, right?
The average person did not get this, right?
No, it had to be like super bad, right? Yeah. This is the worst of the worst. Yeah. And I read a little bit more about how they wrote it. It's another one that kind of grew up, out of several of them kind of working together, and they wrote pieces of it. They sort of pulled several guitar parts together and they all worked, and they're like, hey, let's just do that. And so it was interesting. I got kind of interested in how they made it. Because it very much seems like a band, like, we talked about Reptile, which was really long and had lots of sections and things. And so I was curious to see this one's much shorter, but has kind of a tight topic that it's on to see how they handled it or how they went about it. But yeah, I mean, it's heavy. I dig that guy's voice. There's a lot of variety in it. And I think lyrically there's a lot to grab onto here because it's really wordy. There's a lot that kind of goes on within it. I mean, you can kind of follow along with the story and, where sort of the description of the act. So yeah, I liked it. And it's heavy. And the Blood Eagle thing, the Viking imagery is really sharp. So yeah, talk to me about this particular track by Periphery.
So this one comes with some homework because there's actually it's not a full concept album, but there's a story inherent to this song and another song called Church Burner, which is actually the war between the pagans, the pagan Vikings and the Christians. The Christians are coming in and, staking their own claim on people's souls and minds and hearts. And, the back and forth fighting. Now, again, Blood Eagle, this was probably not something that Christians got because I guess it could have been betrayers. I mean, he could have been somebody who was, born
right.
into the faith of Odin and then went Christian and like, well, we don't find that to be
largely
we don't like that. We're
we're not
gonna have to punish
that.
you. No.
Yes.
But the other one, is very much this is a war. This is a war for people's souls, and it was fought with a lot of blood. It's really fascinating. I know the series Vikings. I didn't watch very much of it, but I understand that did show a Blood Eagle.
Okay,
as much as they could on cable TV because
it's pretty graphic.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this song. In fact, the opening line of the song is "We come for war," and they do. I mean, there's no joke. It is a aggressive and violent. They talk about the stench of death, the stench of afterlife, the Valkyries coming down to pick up the faithful and then burn the ones that are not so faithful, the Christians on the ground. So,
right.
I just finished reading Bernard Cornwell's Arthur trilogy. Which is a lot of pagans versus Christians versus Saxons versus all the different warring heads of early England, era 500 AD England. Fascinating, and I think this song really comes up because there's a ton of fighting between the pagans and the Christians. The Christians at the time, in the story at least, I don't know if this is completely historically accurate. He does say there's history and then there's a lot of license taken.
Sure.
But at 500 AD, I think it was 496 when this takes place. They really did think that Christ was going to come back in 500, and then they thought it again at 1000.
We've been thinking it pretty much ever since. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some argument about that. But they really thought that they had to clear the way for Christ's return by killing all the pagans. So there's this huge fighting between Christian England and non-Christian England, and the Saxons, who were very non-Christian England, not pagans, but followed, the Norse gods, their own interpretation of the Norse gods. So really good read, by the by. If you like Bernard Cornwell at all, he's the same author.
That's a Sharps Rifles guy.
Exactly.
Is that the guy who wrote the Sharps books? Yeah, which are excellent.
Page Turner. I had trouble putting these books down. I think I started the first one in October. I just finished the other one today.
Yeah,
the third in the trilogy, and they're not small. They're all 400 or 500 page books.
Okay, yeah. He's a good writer for sure.
Oh, he's good.
Yeah,
so good.
Really,
so good.
The Sharps books were page turners, and that's not a particular era I'm heavily invested in, but he makes them.
He makes you invested.
He makes you invested. That's right, and that's interesting. Like the Christian angle here, I'd kind of spaced on, but that's really important, and kind of I think of all the Norwegian black metal and the church burning and stuff that happened. Mm-hmm. And that's really rooted in that conflict. Those are people who very much relate to or identify with their Viking ancestors who were put down and had Christianity imposed upon them.
Right.
And so much of that. Yeah, so much of that movement was that's you can't we don't believe that. We reject this Christianity that you put on us. So so in that way, it's kind of it's sort of a violent, but it's a violent rebellion against a violence that was done to them a long time ago. If you think, by sort of erasing their culture, saying no, you don't worship Odin and those people. It's Jesus now. That's it. So that's very. It's an important part of the song that I kind of overlooked too, is that the fact that it's really this Christian conflict, which is ironic, right? Because we in the West, I think, have generally been trained to believe if you're in a conflict with Christians, you're probably wrong, but it doesn't feel that way here, does it? Right? Yeah.
Funny. It's weird how there could be people who feel that they are righteous, who are oppressing and doing horrible things to people for no reason, because their own faith doesn't even agree with that statement.
If only there were some modern corollary to this that we could make. But no,
don't go looking for motifs. No.
we're not going to do that. So Periphery, man. Yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting. We've done 11. Anything more to say on that one before we wrap? Or
so I have to say, I gave you 6 songs, and I said I cannot drop one. I cannot come up with one that I don't think is worthy of this inclusion.
Yeah.
And I could have gone on because I have many songs of anger.
Yes.
But I think that you looked at them and said, yeah, I can get rid of one, and then could not because you too found them all compelling.
Yeah. I did, so. Yeah, even there were some, I mean, obviously there are a couple that appeal to me like a little more, just musically and things, but that's always the case. But I mean, yeah, it was interesting to listen to all of them, and I thought, well, I'll listen to all of them and then tell Robert which one to drop, and I'm like, nah, let's just talk about all 6 of them, right? What's one more? Yeah, because I couldn't pick one that felt droppable.
The scary thing is that I feel like our podcast is now misnamed.
Yeah,
I just don't know what to do about that.
Do Damon
6.5, Damon and Robert's 6.5, 7.
Damon and Robert's 10 or 11 songs.
Yeah.
Damon and Robert talk about however many songs they feel like. Right, exactly. Right, it's less than a dozen songs with Damon and Robert.
Maybe not.
Maybe, right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, we'll work on it, and if any of our listeners have great suggestions, send them in. But we may just leave it as it is because that's
5's a good round number.
5 is right, exactly right. And
in a world of listicles, 5 seems to be the magic one.
That's right. And who's going to complain about getting one extra song?
That's right.
Right, exactly.
This costs you nothing.
This is all gravy. That's right. That's right. We have not increased our per unit price at all, which is still 0.
Pass the savings on to you, which there are none.
Exactly.
Carried 0 times 0 plus 0
times 0 is still 0.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you've done it again. Thank you, Robert.
This was fun.
It was indeed. We will, as we record this, is just before the holiday season in December, so we'll get this out, and then we'll probably be back maybe we would hope in January. If
I hope so.
Our act back together.
We did kind of mess up not get one together in November, but it was kind of a bad time.
It was a bad month. Maybe you remember. Maybe some of you remember.
Still drinking to forget.
Month. That's right. And we'll a quick cross plug. We plugged this podcast on our other Bandersnatch Productions podcast, which is the Uncertain Equations podcast that Mark and I do to talk about movies. Currently, we're talking about Twin Peaks over there. We
still talking about Twin Peaks.
We'll be talking about Twin Peaks indefinitely. We're on season 2 right now. There's 3 seasons to talk. I don't know if we're going to do them all in order, but
I have no.
But anyway, exactly. So that's so just a quick cross plug for that. It also took a bit of a hiatus in November because reasons, and now we'll be starting back up. So check that out if you're waiting for a new one of us to drop, or vice versa. If you don't have a new Uncertain Equations, come listen to a new Damon and Robert's 5 songs instead, and you can hop back and forth. If you just can't get enough of us, it's more's coming.
We're so sorry.
We're so sorry that that's the case, and we'll have more for you soon. And we'll be back.
Maybe seek medical help too.
Exactly. If you're hearing our voices and the other voices, talk to somebody. All right. Well, enjoy everyone, and we'll be back with you soon.
Thank you so much. Good
night. Bye now.
A Bandersnatch production.